Hi, now that we covered monetary policy, let's move to fiscal policy. And we're going to, again, use the model with flexible exchange rate, and this time we're going to model fiscal expansion. So, increase in government spending. Again, we need to assume the degree of capital mobility, and we're going to start with no capital mobility. Okay, so again we start with the same graph as usual. So we've got income over here, interest rate over here, IS, LM, and vertical BP. This is equilibrium interest rate, and this is equilibrium GDP. Okay, so we're gonna start by, of course, closed economy effect. So what we are assuming now is that government increases level of spending, so IS curve moves to the right. Okay, what happens in the closed economy? Well, we see that increasing government spending increases GDP, which in turn increases money demand, and with higher money demand we have higher interest rate. Right? Okay, now this is our closed economy fact. Now let's see what happens within the open economy. Well, here we remember that if GDP increases, current account goes into deficit, and this creates a pressure on depreciation. We need to pay more units of our currency for 1 unit of foreign currency. Now we can completely ignore impact of interest rate, right? Because, of course, there is no capital mobility. So what's going to happen then? Well, this chain of causality you already know quite well. So this will improve current account, which in turn will have positive impact on GDP, which in turn will increase money demand and interest rate even further. But of course, with higher GDP, we will see that current account is going to get is going to get in the opposite direction right here. So it's going to be closing at 0. Okay. So what we need to do now is to move. Oh, sorry, where is my choke? So what we need to do now? IS moves even further to the right. IS moves even further to the right, and BP as an outcome of depreciation also moves to the right. So now we see the GDP has increased, as well as the interest rate. Okay, Okay. Okay, so what can we say about this case? Of course, this is our open economy effect. So, look, is fiscal policy effective? Well, definitely it is. But look, what is even more important, the fiscal policy with flexible exchange rates, with open economy, with no capital mobility, is even more effective than it would be in closed economy. So we can definitely see that fiscal policy is effective. Okay, so now that we've covered this case, let's move on to the case of low capital mobility. IS, LM, and we've got BP that is steeper than LM. Of course, we are assuming that IS and LM are not changing again. The only thing that rotates is BP. So here is our initial equilibrium, and here is the interest rate. So again, government is increasing the level of spending. As a result, government spending is increasing. As a result, GDP goes up, which increases money demand and increases interest rate. So, what is happening here? Of course, we know that with higher GDP, we will have a higher imports. Current account goes to deficit, which creates pressure on depreciation. But what happens over here? Higher interest rate means that our assets, our bonds, bring higher rate of return. We observe capital inflow. Capital account goes into surplus this time. So what kind of pressure we expect here? Well, foreigners want to buy more of our currency, so we see pressure on appreciation. And you see now the question of which pressures is stronger is more important. Here, because we've got low capital mobility, we say that current account dominates capital account effect. This pressure is stronger, so what we see is depreciation. With depreciation, we've got improvement in current account, higher GDP. With higher GDP, we've got higher money demand, higher interest rate. We've got yes. What is happening now? Well, over here we see that current account would go further into deficit, right? And we would see that capital account would get into surplus. So, what is happening over here? Well, we have equilibrium imbalance of payments, but here current account deficit is compensated by capital account surplus, which still can bring equilibrium exchange rate. Not a problem. Okay, so what will we see over here? Well, first, IS moves to the right, but by less than in the previous case. Okay. And PP moves to the right as well. So we see again that both interest rate and GDP increased, but this time GDP increased by a little bit less. Why? Because we had now opposing pressure on appreciation. So the currency depreciated by less than over here. And as a result, of course, GDP increased by less. So what can we say about this case? Well, fiscal policy is less effective. Okay, so let's open the capital account even further, and let's move to the case of capital. Let's move to the case of capital of high capital mobility. Okay, so what do we see? What should we do now? Okay, we draw a graph again, this time with flatter BP than LM. Again, we are assuming that IS and LM have the same slopes as before. Okay, so here we have equilibrium income, here we have equilibrium interest rate. So, government increases spending, as a result, IS moves to the right. So, we see that government spending goes up, income goes up, money demand goes up, and interest rate goes up. Higher income creates current account deficit, which creates pressure on depreciation. But higher interest rate creates current account surplus, capital account surplus, and we have capital inflow, and this creates pressure on appreciation. Now, which of these two pressures is winning? Well, of course, now pressure on depreciation, on appreciation, because we have high capital mobility. So capital account effect dominates current account effect, and we get that our currency appreciates. When our currency appreciates, current account worsens. Even further, we have drop in GDP associated with that drop in money demand and interest rate. So when current account goes current account here goes actually further into deficit, while capital account a capital account worsens, right? So here we would see capital account that course. Okay, how would we see this on the graph? Look, now IS, as a result of this appreciation, is going a little bit back to the left, to the position in the middle IS piece. Well, BP line is moving up because we see appreciation of the currency. So what can we say here? Fiscal policy is even less effective. Which, of course, we see over here in the new equilibrium, which, of course, is characterized by higher GDP and higher interest rate. But look, now fiscal policy is less effective than in case of the closed economy. So we see that actually opening a capital account, making capital more mobile under flexible exchange rates, worsens effectiveness of fiscal policy. Okay, so finally, let's consider a case of perfect capital mobility. So we've got number 4, perfect capital mobility. Okay, this case will actually be the easiest to draw because in this case BP curve, of course, is not moving. So we've got IS, we've got LM, okay, and we've got B. B that should be, of course, perfectly horizontal. So domestic interest rate in equilibrium is equal to world interest rate in equilibrium, and so we've got here Y 0. Okay, and here we actually just need to IW. We don't even need equilibrium. Okay. So again, government increases level of spending. What happens next? Well, government increases level of spending, income increases, money demand increases, and interest rate increases. Okay, this is our well-known closed economy effect. Now, what happens in the open economy? Well, money here, current account goes into deficit, which creates pressure on depreciation. Here, capital account goes into surplus, which creates pressure on appreciation. Which one of the two wins? Well, of course, pressure on appreciation from a capital account. So, because here we have perfect capital mobility, so capital account effect completely dominates current account effect. And so what happens appreciation of the currency, worsening of current account, drop in GDP, a decrease in money demand and decrease in interest rate. And look, this happens until interest rate in the world and in this economy are not equal to one another. So we will see here that we need to have level of a depreciation that will actually move current account so far that it will completely eliminate initial impact of increased government spending, and we go back to the same equilibrium as we started from. So what we see over here is that fiscal policy is not effective. Okay, so what is the main conclusion from our considerations over here? Well, first is that effectiveness of fiscal policy under flexible exchange rate is conditioned upon the degree of capital mobility. The higher the capital mobility, the less effective the fiscal policy is. With perfect capital mobility, fiscal policy is completely ineffective, which means that it has no impact on GDP in the short run whatsoever. Okay, so this is it about a macroeconomic policy under flexible exchange rates. In the next video, we're going to start with monetary policy under fixed exchange rates. Thank you for your attention.